If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
It could, and why? Because he's doing it for personal reasons.
I have more to play from where that came from. Some of the most stunning video or audio that I've heard in quite some time to play for you throughout this segment. But of course, I want to bring in our legal expert, Aaron Parnas, to help us do so. So Aaron, explain for the audience sort of what we're talking about here, and then we'll get on to other stunning audio bits from these oral arguments.
Yeah, so this morning, the United States Supreme Court heard oral argument over whether or not Donald Trump is absolutely immune from criminal prosecution related to his official acts taken in advance of and on January 6, 2021. We heard some crazy arguments coming from John Sauer, Donald Trump's personal attorney, in front of the Supreme Court this morning, when the Supreme Court was really testing the bounds of this absolute immunity argument. Remember, Donald Trump's attorneys argued that for every official act a president takes, or any act that potentially could be an official act, the president is absolutely immune from criminal prosecution. Well, the president, former or current, is able to be prosecuted for acts not taken in their official capacity. So their argument is that all of the actions taken by Trump, or at least many of them, were taken in his official capacity as president at the time, and therefore he's absolutely immune. But I will say there are some key points in the argument, and we can talk about this in this segment, is that in that Trump's attorneys actually conceded that parts of the indictment did not include official acts and were actually acts taken in Trump's capacity as a presidential candidate in his personal capacity. So the indictment could move forward under their theory in there. So at least in some respect, it looks like the indictment's going to move forward, but we don't know in what form and what the scope of the charges will be.
Okay, and before getting into any more analysis, let me just play another one of these moments here.
How about if a president orders the military to stage a coup?
I think that, as the Chief Justice pointed out earlier, where there is a whole series of, sort of guidelines against that, so to speak, like the UCMJ prohibits the military from following a plainly unlawful act. If one adopted Justice Alito's test, that would fall outside.
I'm going to really quickly pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just click that subscribe button plus the like button as well, and the alert bell so you get notifications. Back to it.
Now, if one adopts, for example, the Fitzgerald test that we advanced, that may well be an official act, and he would have to be, as I'll say in response to all these kinds of hypotheticals, has to be impeached and convicted before he can be criminally prosecuted. But I emphasize to the court that—
Well, he's gone. Let's say this president who ordered the military to stage a coup. He's no longer president. He wasn't impeached. He couldn't be impeached. But he ordered the military to stage a coup, and you're saying that's an official act.
I think it would depend.
That's immune.
I think it would depend on the circumstances whether it was an official act. If it were an official act, again, he would have to be impeached.
Well, what does that mean, depend on the circumstances? He was the president. He is the commander-in-chief. He talks to his generals all the time, and he told the generals, I don't feel like leaving office. I want to stage a coup. Is that immune?
If it's an official act, there needs to be impeachment and conviction beforehand, because the framers viewed that kind of
If
very
it's an
low
official
risk.
act, is it an official act?
If it's an official act, it's impeachment.
Is it an official act?
And of course, the ones that I found the most interesting were the more liberal justices really pressing the bounds of this argument and seeing how far Trump's lawyer, John Sauer, would go. And there, him saying, yeah, under the framework that I just outlined, even a military coup could be something that a president is immune from being prosecuted for. Aaron.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty crazy argument, and this wasn't the only hypothetical that they posed that John Sauer kind of let in with a weird, crazy kind of theory. They also posed what would happen if Trump initiated a slate of false electors, for example. They also asked about whether or not Trump or a president ordered the assassination of a political opponent. And in all of those respects, John Sauer essentially said that, hey, if they were done in the official capacity as president, then absolute immunity would be proper. But remember, John Sauer likes to compare, and some of the justices even compared this to what would happen in foreign countries where a outgoing president is sometimes arrested by an incoming president and an incoming presidential party. Well, what they're advocating here for is that essentially an outgoing president can commit a coup against America and not face any liability unless they were impeached by the United States Congress, and then they could face some type of prosecution. But even then, there is a bit of a wrench in that argument, given the fact that Donald Trump, when he was impeached for January 6, 2021, he wasn't convicted, but he was impeached. One of the principal arguments they were making was that the impeachment was unconstitutional because Donald Trump was no longer in office. So it really is kind of confusing as Trump's team is trying to have it both ways. On one hand, they're saying that he has to be impeached and convicted before being able to be charged for some of these criminal offenses, while on the other hand, they were previously saying that he can't be impeached and convicted because he wasn't in office anymore. So it's a very weird and attenuated argument, but some of the justices were inclined to agree. So it was interesting to watch today.
Well, and if the concern is an incoming president directing the prosecution of an outgoing president, also a sitting president, you're now giving the power to, if you go by Trump's lawyer's argument, they could prosecute their political opponents wrongfully or assassinate their political opponents and get away from criminal prosecution. And also in the case of some of these extreme acts that are being discussed, when the only way you could address such an act is impeachment and conviction, as you talked about, elected leaders could fail, but also some of these things, maybe you want to find out or get the evidence that, for example, the political opponent was assassinated by the sitting president. And once they're out of office, if the evidence isn't brought forward until afterwards, they're just immune from such an event. Seems pretty horrifying to me. Here's another moment.
If a president sells nuclear secrets to a foreign adversary, is that immune?
That sounds like, similar to the bribery example, likely not immune. Now, if it's structured as an official act, he would have to be impeached and convicted first before.
What does that mean if it's structured as an official act?
Well, I don't know in the hypothetical whether or not that would be an official act. You'd probably have to have more details to apply the Blazing Game analysis or even the Fitzgerald analysis that we've been talking about.
Apply it to the allegations here. What is plausible about the president assisting in creating a fraudulent slate of electoral candidates? Assuming you accept the facts of the complaint on their face, is that plausible that that would be within his right to do?
Absolutely, Your Honor. We have the historical precedent we cited in the lower courts of President Grant sending federal troops to Louisiana and Mississippi in 1876.
So then you heard there, the second clip was what Aaron referenced with the fraudulent slate of electors and John Sauer saying absolutely that could happen, which then, how do we protect the legitimacy of elections if a president can, regardless of the result, put together their own slate of electors? And then if Trump's plan had worked and Pence or local officials had gone along with this plan more, then he could have had this insane justification to stay in power despite losing. And before throwing that to you, Aaron, and you'll give some relevant news to the fake electors scheme, I also want to remind MAGA, everything that you're defending Trump's lawyers arguing here has to apply then to Biden as well. And so when Trump's trying to say that somehow Biden is illegally acting by engaging in some witch hunt against Trump, which is false, but that's the narrative, everything that you think Biden is doing wrong, that's unlawful and justifies impeachment, all of that he could just be protected from under this same argument if he could make some ridiculous argument that it's within his official acts. But moving from that, because the fake elector scheme was brought up here, I know we have some big news on that. Aaron, give it to us.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big believer that timing is everything, Luke, and it's pretty funny that just yesterday, Rudy Giuliani was indicted. Mark Meadows was also indicted. Others were indicted for a fake elector scheme out in Arizona. They face several years in federal prison now for that fake elector scheme to help Donald Trump overturn the Arizona results and in total overturn the 2020 election results. And in that indictment, Donald Trump was actually named as an unindicted co-conspirator. And if you look at the evidence in the indictment, Trump could have easily been a co-defendant as well. There are several reasons why the Arizona Attorney General wouldn't have indicted Trump, but he is an unindicted co-conspirator. And for his attorneys to argue in front of the Supreme Court that this fake elector scheme, essentially the one that was indicted yesterday, could be an official act is really ludicrous, given that it was done for Trump in his capacity as a candidate, not in his capacity as president.
Yeah, and as all of you know, now that I've talked about it many, many times, because our presidents are technically selected by the Electoral College based on the elections in each state, what they're trying to do is throw out the actual lawful electors and then fraudulently assert and then accept Trump's preferred electors as the real ones, justifying Trump again staying in power despite losing an election. And if you're saying that that's something that is something you could classify as within his official acts, then again, if you have a power hungry enough president in the future like Trump was, I don't know how we protect our elections. Pretty scary stuff. Aaron, where can people find you?
Just on all my social platforms at Aaron Parnas.